Hello, you're watching Calling All Stations to the first update of, I hope, many on a new layout project that I'm going to be working on. Those of you who follow my site regularly usually know that I like to do these posts written with pictures. I spend a lot of time doing them, so I'm branching out into the YouTube market in the hope for me that it will at least speed this update process up. So far, this is about the 20th take of this intro so far, so I'm not sure actually how much quicker it's going to be for me, but I'm going to experiment with doing YouTube updates. A little nervous about how it's going to go, but we'll certainly see. So those of you who are regular visitors to my site will know I used to have my main project that sat about here in the room. It was called Langston Junction, a 4-foot by 6-foot oval layout, and it was basically my first attempt at getting back into the hobby from when I was into it as a teenager, and doing those slightly more complicated things like scenery, woodwork, track work, doing the point motors, signalling, all that kind of slightly more complicated stuff that elevates a layout above just being a train set. And with some of the stock that you see over there. So I basically felt that I'd gone as far as I could with Langston Junction, both technically and operationally. The trouble with having a small oval layout, even though it did take up most of my room here, is that the trains would continuously sort of come around every sort of 20 to 30 seconds, which, although it's nice to sort of sit back and watch trains run, it did feel like more of a train set than a layout, and it did feel slightly visually unrealistic. Certainly as well because having only a 4-foot depth, even though it did take up most of the space here, would require you to have quite tight radius of curve, which means with some of the stock down here, some of the coaching stock, certainly the Mark IIIs at least would look very unrealistic traversing those curves. So with that knowledge in mind, I felt, you know what, I'm going to start again. I'm going to completely refresh, go back to the drawing board and think about how I can make it look visually interesting, but visually and operationally realistic. And I decided basically to move away from an oval layout, which has sort of solved two problems. It's allowing me to start again, to rebuild from scratch, and through that I'm going to be experimenting with DCC, more complicated signalling systems as well. But it's also allowed me to save a bit of space in the room, which is sort of a bonus. So Langston Junction didn't just get dismantled or sort of salvaged for parts. I sold that complete to a lovely chap in Enfield, and it's his first experiment with getting back into the hobby, which I did feel was rather poetic. So he can use Langston Junction to sort of experiment and learn, and then probably in a few years' time, like me, he will think about designing his next thing, having learnt a lot from Langston Junction. So moving on to what I'm going to be doing next, really. So as you can tell, the room has changed quite a lot. I've now got this space over here with these two cabinets sort of stacked side by side, and you can probably tell it's going to be an end-to-end layout or a shelf layout. There's about 10 foot there between the wall over there where that stacked radiator is, and the bin over here. These cabinets here are about 8 foot long, but the layout's going to be slightly longer than that, and just overhang the edges is going to be about 10 foot. And there's going to be two baseboards, two 5-foot baseboards, one over there and then one over there, and as you guessed, the kind of centre point will be split there where the cabinets meet. At the moment, by the way, this is one of my other projects, Norton Folgate sidings, which is sort of just sitting nicely on the top. I will find another place for that to live when I do start the next project. So even though it's going to be very long, it's not going to be that deep. These cabinets measure slightly under 1.5 feet deep. The layout isn't going to be that deep, to be honest. It's only going to be about a foot deep, which isn't massive, but it's still enough to be operationally interesting, and I'll get onto the design in more detail on the computer in a minute. So over here is going to be a 3-platform station with lines that will accommodate a 4-car train, and then as the lines run down to the middle of the board, a line will branch off to the back where there'll be sort of a 2-road fiddle yard at the back, and then at the front there'll be a 2-road siding or carriage works, or even a TMD, traction and maintenance depot area down here. I'm going to design it though in such a way that I hope will be slightly clever, and I'll get on to talking about that now on the computer. So we're at the computer now, and we're using a free trial piece of software called AnyRail 5. This is a great tool. It sort of allows you to design some ideas and kind of map out some track without having to go out and buy the points and buy all the expensive stuff and make the mistakes in real life. You can kind of all map it out on the screen before you go and buy stuff, which is certainly really useful. So let's take a look at some of the features of my new proposed design in a little bit more detail. So you've got the station end, as I was talking about, down this side on the left hand side. The main point to talk about here is this figure here, 46.5 inches. That's the length of platform 1. I got a few coaches out and I got some locos out, and I discovered that 46.5 inches will comfortably accommodate a 4-car train, and that could be a multiple unit train, or it could be 1 loco and 3 coaches. And I'll get a bit onto why I've chosen that length of train a little bit later on when I talk about era and setting. But I discovered the sort of 4-car length or 4-coach length is sort of the perfect length for this size layout. Anything shorter and it starts to get a bit unrealistic. You know, a loco and 2 coaches perhaps unrealistic. Certainly sort of a diesel loco and 2 coaches. Maybe you get that in sort of suburban steam. But again, I'll get on to talk about the setting and the era later on. I felt that 4 cars was perfect for what I was trying to achieve, and perfect for the stock that I've already got. I've already got some 4-coach EMUs, and I've got a lot of stock that would sit well with 1 loco and 3 coaches. I've got a lot of sets of coaches in 3s, as it were. So that 46.5 figure played into designing the rest of the layout. That's sort of why I've had to make the layout 10 foot long. It's not just to use as much space as I can, it's so that I can accommodate 4-car train in the platform, as well as shunting that train into the fiddle yard. So this section will accommodate that 46.5 inch train, as well as this siding here. These sidings here will certainly accommodate those 4-car trains. So the idea is you'd have a couple stored here, or at least 1 stored up in the fiddle yard. It will come out of the fiddle yard into platform 1. If it's an EMU or a DMU, it can go straight into the carriage sidings, or if it's a loco driven train, the loco can back the coaches up to here and then run round the train using this loop. It could then either go off to one of the other platforms or the TMD area, and a small shunter can come in. It could pull the train back into the sidings, which is why you've got this other loop here, so the shunter can escape the sidings. Or, you know, the loco could properly run around the train and pull the train itself back into the carriage sidings or back into the TMD area. So the other 2 platforms, platforms 2 and 3, are obviously a bit shorter. Platform 2 could accommodate a 2-car multiple unit train, or maybe a loco and some wagons or something like that. And platform 3 is shorter still. That's probably going to be earmarked for some kind of commercial use. So either wagon loading or parcel loading facilities will go on platform 3. It will probably be less a passenger platform and more kind of freight maintenance and things like that going on there. On the end of the layout, this yellow section here, this is going to be raised up above the layout, so it will hide the fiddle yard behind this blue scenic break. This blue scenic break will probably be kind of balustrades or some sort of retaining wall holding up or appearing to hold up this yellow raised section, which will probably accommodate a town scene running along the back of this black backboard here. We'll probably have some low relief buildings in, make the scene a bit more interesting, and then when it gets to here, it will kind of neatly transition into a road bridge, which will run over the layout and sort of hide the gap in the two baseboards. Don't forget, these they're going to be two 5 foot by 1 foot baseboards, one on the left here and one on the right here. The split here on this red line, I'm hoping the road bridge will kind of take focus away from the fact that there's kind of a join in the baseboards. And I've been careful to make sure there's no point work over that red line, so it should make cutting the track accurate and easy over this join. And then on the right hand side, as I say, we're going to have a kind of TMD, traction maintenance depot, or carriage siding area. I haven't quite nailed down what exactly is going to go over here. I'll put this kind of green square in here. This could be a loco shed or a carriage maintenance building of some kind, but I also quite like the idea of just maybe having this top road completely clear with sort of a kind of maintenance platform or some kind of maintenance steps for cleaners to come in and clean some of these DMUs, EMUs that are coming in to serve the station on the left hand side. There may be some kind of, maybe a parcel facility here. I've got loads of different freight stock that I could think about making kind of dioramas for in this kind of bottom right hand corner. We're talking kind of the nuclear flasks. We could have a facility for that. I've got lots of sort of parcel Royal Mail stock, so perhaps something on those lines. But there's kind of scope for this to be developed in the future. I haven't sort of nailed down that, and I'm sort of okay with that at the moment. Okay, so in terms of location and era for my layouts, you'll notice that I've labelled the station here Woodford Wells and Woodford Wells TMD and carriage sidings. Woodford Wells is a real place in real life. If we have a look at Google Maps, Woodford Wells is sort of this sort of pocket of land here, this sort of area of housing on Epping New Road, which is in northeast London, bordering Essex, suburban northeast London, bordering Essex. There is no line running through Woodford Wells. The nearest line is the former Great Eastern Railway that runs out to Ongar, which is now, of course, part of the Tube. It's part of the Central Line. So the nearest stations in real life would be Woodford, Roding Valley, and even Buckhurst Hill up here. But as I said, there is no real life railway that runs to Woodford Wells. It's just an area I'm fairly familiar with. I know what it should kind of look like. But the station itself, you'll notice, is, as it's an end-to-end layout, it's clearly a terminus station. And that setup is modelled on a real-life equivalent, which is not far away from real-life Woodford Wells. It is, in fact, if we carry on a little further up northeast London, Chinkford, which is a kind of an urban commuter terminus station. I'm quite interested in this idea of these kind of short lines that have run out of London termini and not really gone very far. It's only come out of London Liverpool Street for a few miles and then has sort of stopped abruptly at Chinkford, in this sort of terminus setup. So that's exactly what I'm trying to model. Although the station's called Woodford Wells, which is kind of a mile to the east, it's going to be based loosely on Chinkford. So if we swap over to the satellite view, you'll see real-life Chinkford indeed has 3 platforms. You may notice that real-life Chinkford is a bit bigger. It's able to accommodate 8 coach trains, and I'm not mimicking that simply because I don't have room for 8 coach trains. It would be lovely to have 8 coach trains, but we only really have room for 4, as I said. 46.5 inches is sort of the kind of minimum amount of space I needed to comfortably fit in 4 coach trains and be able to kind of hide them in the scenic fiddle yard, behind the scenic break and the fiddle yard over here. So that's really the maximum amount of train length I can accommodate. And you'll see that 4 coach trains do run in and out of Chinkford, so it's fairly realistic. I'm going to be fairly loose with basing Woodford Wells on Chinkford. It's more to kind of get a sense of the general station look, and kind of how it would have looked in the era that I'll model it. And again, I'll talk about that slightly later, rather than accurately representing Chinkford. If I was going to accurately represent Chinkford, I would have just named the station Chinkford and modelled it exactly like Chinkford. It's more to kind of focus my energies slightly on, okay, it's a local station for me. I can go there, I can take pictures of what it looks like, and I can kind of focus my energies, but it still allows me to have some imagination with developing it in my own way. If we look at the track plan for real life Chinkford, you'll see that there's some carriage sidings next to the station. I don't obviously have room for those, but what I do have room for if we move south of Chinkford is it does have this kind of carriage siding area with a few buildings. There's even a train wash here, and these are possibly some kind of sort of outhouse buildings for maintenance sheds for cleaners and engineers to keep out of the elements and to keep out of the weather when they're maintaining the fleet of trains that arrive and terminate at Chinkford, or arrive, in my case, in Woodford Wells, and then they can be looked after in the TMD and carriage siding area here. So in terms of era, I'm thinking sort of late 1980s, early 1990s, hence why I've been talking about EMUs and DMUs. So I'm thinking sort of the Class 411s and Class 416s. I've already got a couple of those in my collection. Although Chinkford in real life is an overhead line, and those classes are third rail. I haven't quite decided. It might be a third rail system I run. I may even put some fourth rail in there and experiment with some underground stock as well, make it a multi-purpose station. That's where I'm sort of deviating from real life Chinkford. I'll sort of use a bit of artistic license to run the stock I want. Other things I can pick maybe some loco hauled coaches, loco hauled Mark 1s or Mark 2s using a Class 50 or a Class 47. Plus I can look into including some kind of maybe a Royal Mail sorting facility on platform 3. Again, there's loads of scope for stock and locos that I can use in the late 80s and early 90s period. I know it's a very popular era, and you've got kind of people on YouTube like Everard Junction, Glebe Junction, modelling the Network Southeast era. Even Dave Class 47, YouTube user who models Dean Park, which is based in Scotland, it's still the same era, although obviously it's not Network Southeast. It's still that same sort of late 80s BR Blue era. But it's popular, and there's a reason for it's popular, and there's a great range of stock to run. So that's why I've picked it. Moving back to sort of the track work and the design and the kind of technical spec of the layout, I'm going to be using Pecco Class 75 track, which is a little bit more realistic than the kind of Hornby set track that you get in train packs and such. And I'm going to be using mostly sort of modern built stock, so I don't have to worry about fitting new wheels to cope with the shallower rail depth of Class 75 track. Everything's going to be DCC. I'm going to convert most of my stock to DCC running. The point work's all going to be DCC. Signals, it's all going to be controlled from one central controller, which I've got coming on the way. Hopefully I'll talk about that in another video. All the stuff is going to take a few weeks to come for me to start playing with it. DCC is a kind of new game for me, so it's another learning curve for me, so I'll be experimenting with that over the coming weeks. So the next update may not be for a month or so while I start to put some of this stuff together, but in the meantime, do drop me a line about how you think about me doing YouTube updates rather than sort of written posts. Is that preferred? Do you like the new method? Do you not like the new method? Let me know about the layout, the design, the era that I picked, the area. Let me know your thoughts. I'd be really interested to know. In the meantime, keep up to date with all the rail world happenings on www.callingallstations.co.uk, and I will see you soon. You've been watching Calling All Stations.